Jesus of Nazareth is one of the most debated and studied historical figures in the world. Although most of the information regarding his life and teachings comes from writings in the New Testament, evidence for his existence is also found in various non-Christian sources. These sources come from various backgrounds, including Roman historians, Jews, Greek philosophers, and other texts that did not originate from the Christian community. Why is it important to look at references to Jesus outside of the Bible? One of the main reasons is to confirm that Jesus is not just a mythical or legendary figure exaggerated by his followers, but also recognized as a real historical figure by various witnesses of his contemporaries, both friends and foes. In a historical context, it is important to verify the existence of a figure through a variety of mutually supporting sources, especially from parties who may not have an interest in proving or discrediting the figure. Tracing these sources helps us understand how Jesus was viewed by people outside the early Christian community. Did they recognize him as a prophet, a wise teacher, or even as a threat to the social and political order? The answers to these questions vary, depending on who was writing and what their motivations were. What these accounts have in common, however, is the recognition of Jesus' existence and his influence that was significant enough to be recorded in history. Historians and thinkers from diverse cultural and religious backgrounds have mentioned Jesus in their works. While their views were often influenced by their own beliefs, these writings remain strong evidence that Jesus was a real historical figure, whose impact transcended religious boundaries. Here are some accounts of Jesus from sources outside of Christianity. Flavius Josephus, Jewish historian. Flavius Josephus was a Jewish historian born in 37 AD, just a few years after Jesus' crucifixion. In his famous work, Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus mentions Jesus in two references known as the Testimonium Flavianum and a reference to James, Jesus' brother. The Testimonium Flavianum describes Jesus as a wise man who performed marvelous deeds and became a teacher to many. Josephus also records that Jesus was regarded as the Christ by his followers and that Pontius Pilate condemned him to crucifixion. Although some of the content of the Testimonium is disputed by scholars, most agree that Josephus does mention Jesus, although perhaps in less favorable language than the text we have today. Another account in Josephus' work is that of James, Jesus' brother, who is mentioned in the context of his arrest and execution. Josephus refers to Jesus as the Christ in this description, which indicates that Jesus' identity as the Messiah was recognized by some groups at the time, though not universally. Tacitus, Roman historian. Cornelius Tacitus, writing in the early 2nd century AD, provides one of the most significant references to Jesus from a non-Christian perspective. In his work, Annals, Tacitus recorded the persecution of Christians in Rome under the reign of Emperor Nero. Tacitus writes that Nero blamed the Christians, who followed the teachings of Christus, who were executed by Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. The importance of this reference lies in the fact that Tacitus was writing from a Roman perspective that was not sympathetic to Christianity. This suggests that Jesus was recognized as a historical figure by Roman society, and that his teachings had spread enough by the beginning of the 2nd century for Christians to become a visible group in the eyes of the Roman government. Phlegon of Tralles, a Greek historian's witness. Phlegon of Tralles, a Greek writer in the 2nd century AD, recorded various natural and historical events in his works. One such account that attracts attention is the report of the pitch-black event that occurred at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, which is referred to as a miracle. Phlegon mentions that at the same time as the crucifixion, there was a solar eclipse that caused darkness for 3 hours, and that a major earthquake also occurred. This account is interesting because it shows that the events of Jesus' crucifixion attracted attention not only in Christian circles, but also in secular accounts. Phlegon, although not intending to support the claims of Christianity, indirectly confirmed the existence of extraordinary natural phenomena that coincided with the time of Jesus' crucifixion, as recorded in the Gospels. Phlegon's reference strengthens the argument that the event of Jesus' crucifixion was remembered not only by his followers, but also by secular observers who had no attachment to the Christian tradition. Thus, this account adds to the evidence that the events surrounding Jesus' life and death left a mark on history, transcending the boundaries of particular religions and traditions. Pliny the Younger, Letter to Emperor Trajan. Pliny the Younger, a Roman governor of the Bithynia-Pontus region, wrote a letter to Emperor Trajan around 112 AD. In the letter, Pliny sought advice on how to deal with the growing number of Christians in his province. Pliny described the Christians as a group that held secret meetings, sang praises to Christ as Lord, and lived a moral life. Although Pliny does not mention Jesus directly, his recognition of the worship of Christ as Lord suggests that Jesus had divine status in the Christian community and that his teachings had spread widely, even in areas far from Judea. Jewish Talmud, criticism of Jesus. The Talmud is a collection of rabbinic texts that are the foundation of Jewish law and tradition. In some parts of the Talmud, Jesus is mentioned in a very negative context. One of the most famous references is in Tractate Sanhedrin, where Jesus is referred to as Yeshu, who was presented as a witch who misled Israel and was eventually executed. Although these references are polemical and negative, their presence in the Talmud shows that Jesus was a significant figure to Jewish society at that time, even if his influence was considered destructive. These accounts also show that the memory of Jesus and his teachings remained alive in the Jewish collective memory, albeit in a different form from what is found in the Christian tradition. Mara bar Serapion, the death of Jesus in philosophical perspective. Mara bar Serapion was a Stoic philosopher from Syria who wrote a letter to his son, in which he compared the death of Jesus to that of Socrates and Pythagoras. This letter was most likely written in the late 1st or early 2nd century AD, and although Jesus is not mentioned by name, the context makes it clear that Jesus was one of the wise kings to Mara bar Serapion was referring. This letter shows that Jesus' death was seen as an event comparable to the deaths of other great figures in the history of philosophy, indicating a recognition of the ethical and philosophical impact of Jesus' life and death, even beyond the Jewish and Christian traditions. Lucianus of Samosata, Jesus as a satirical figure. Lucianus of Samosata was a 2nd century Greek satirist who often mocked various aspects of Greco-Roman society, including religion and belief. In his work, The Passing of Peregrinus, Lucianus derided Christians and portrayed them as followers of a crucified man, whom they regarded as God. Although Lucianus writes in a mocking tone, his references to Jesus show that Jesus was widely recognized as a figure who was respected by his followers, even among those who rejected his teachings. Lucianus' work provides additional evidence of how Jesus and his teachings were viewed outside of Christian circles. Celsus, a philosophical critique of Jesus. Celsus was a Greek philosopher who wrote a profound critique of Christianity in the late 2nd century in his work, The True Word. In this book, Celsus accused Jesus of practicing magic and claiming to be a god, even though he thought Jesus was just an ordinary man who attracted followers from the lower classes. Although Celsus' work was intended as an attack on Christianity, his references to Jesus show that Jesus was a figure considered important enough to be criticized by a pagan intellectual. Celsus also provides insight into how Jesus' teachings were viewed as a threat by older pagan thinkers. Suetonius, riots in Rome sparked by Chrestus. Suetonius, a Roman historian who wrote about the lives of the emperors, recorded in his Lives of the 12 Caesars that Emperor Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome due to riots sparked by a man named Chrestus. There is debate about whether this Chrestus refers to Jesus, but many historians believe that this is another reference to the impact of Jesus' teachings in Rome. Suetonius' reference is important because it shows that Jesus' teachings, or at least the influence of his followers, had caused considerable tension in the capital of the Roman Empire, reflecting the spread and influence of the early Christian movement. Collecting and analyzing evidence about Jesus from non-Christian sources is an attempt to build a more objective picture of his existence and influence. This evidence helps to fill in any gaps that may exist in the Christian narrative and offers a broader perspective on how Jesus is understood and interpreted within a larger historical context. In addition, references from non-Christian sources help in establishing the chronology and accuracy of the events in Jesus' life. These sources also show that Jesus' influence transcended religious boundaries, reached people of different cultures and beliefs, and caused enough impact to be recorded by prominent historians of the time. As such, evidence from non-Christian sources is not just a supplement, but an essential element in the study of the historical Jesus, helping us to better understand who Jesus was, what he taught, and how he influenced the world in his time and beyond.